Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause the Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, pre-holiday edition.
And holiday edition, because it's going to have to last you guys through that. It's our last one of our last free show.
Yeah, that's right.
Of 2023.
We'll be back again in 2024. Although I don't know, there's a chance. It's a really slow time between Christmas and New Year's. Everybody wants to talk baseball between Christmas and New Year's. Like our forums do very well between Christmas and New Year's. There's never any news.
Your forums at what site? And who are you?
TwinsDaily.com. I'm John Bonos at TwinsDaily.com. That's right. This is the free show. We got to announce ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm John Bonos at TwinsDaily.com. With me, Aaron Gleeman of
The Athletic.
Still?
Well, I have transaction news. You guys,
right.
Everyone's complaining that there's no moves.
Breaking news.
I have a long-term contract extension news locally. The least exciting possible thing.
Not locally, really.
No?
You're signing with a New York affiliate.
Well, that's true. I'm
the
local.
New York team.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I signed a long-term contract extension with The Athletic. Little upstart company out of New York. So I will be doing the same thing, basically.
That's right.
I think I got
No real changes.
I got a title.
How
bump.
long is the extension for? Can you announce it or not?
Could go forever, John. It's a lifetime No, it's a long one. I don't know. For me, it's a long one. It's longer than the previous one. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I told Dan Hayes. He was like, okay. No, he was excited. I joke that Dan and I are. I don't know. I think people get the impression that we're like at odds, but I don't. That's not true.
No,
we just like to pick on each other. But sort of similar to you and I.
Yes.
Although maybe we're at odds. I don't know. I'd be the last to know.
If Gleeman isn't giving you a hard time and you're not giving Gleeman a hard time, you're not friends.
That's true. That's true.
That's how you know if you're a friend, right?
That's true. If you say to yourself, boy, I've known Aaron for 10 years and he's never said a mean thing about me to my face.
Right. And I don't say mean things about
right.
him. Well, that means you're not friends.
That's
right.
interesting. Yeah, that's a good assessment, I would say. Becky would certainly agree with that. She's just shredding me, roasting me from her seat next to me on the couch. But yeah, so I'll be doing, I don't know. We don't need to talk about that much, but we were joking about it the last couple of weeks. But
right.
Little negotiations.
So now I'm contractually required
as part of the contract, because this podcast obviously is separate from the Athletic and the New York Times,
right.
Which they allow. I had to negotiate that into the contract, but yes, I have to.
There were talks once upon a time.
That's right. Yeah, John was like, "Nah." John opened his wallet and went, "Nah, I don't. There's plenty in here." But you have to say I'm Aaron Gleeman from The Athletic, which I am. I'm proud to say that I'm Aaron Gleeman from The Athletic. It's the best job I've ever had. I don't know why I would want to leave it. I didn't tell him that during contract negotiations because you lose all leverage if you say that. But it's a great job, and it's a good job to have. Let's put it this way: if you're also doing 2 to 3 times weekly Twins podcast. For instance, like if I was, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I'd probably have less information about the Twins to share on this podcast. And so the fact that I have a job covering the Twins for The Athletic, it works out well.
That's why you would not trade this for the CEO as a CEO of a Fortune 500
I'd have to
company.
leave the house. I'd have to get dressed up.
Maybe not.
I meant to ask Cory. We had Cory Provus, the new television voice of the Minnesota Twins. Speaking of the podcast,
right, on
the Patreon podcast. On what day was that? Monday morning. Great chat.
Yeah.
You guys know me. I downplay or I'm self-deprecating, and John gets thrown under the bus with that too because he's in this because we share a podcast. Yeah. But I thought this was a great episode, and it was because of Cory.
Provus knows what the hell he's doing when it comes to talking into a mic.
Yes.
What the
but also,
is there.
I thought he had a lot of good stories, which I knew he would, of working with Bob Uecker and Pat Hughes and all this stuff and coming up through the ranks. But also, I thought Ron Santo and his wife, and that was a good story. But I thought he was as revealing as he could be without getting him or someone else in trouble about the bigger picture Twins television situation.
Agreed.
And I'm sure anybody listening to this is very interested in that.
And so we're going to actually play a clip from it later
in the show.
Yeah.
We pulled a clip of Cory and the two of us discussing basically where
things Twins
the
TV.
heck can you watch the Twins in 2024?
Right.
And it's not certain yet, but he provided a lot more, I don't know, clarity, I would say, in the situation. And I would say it's...
I'm not sure that he has a ton of inside information, but he's certainly paying attention to the whole thing, right? Because it obviously affects him. So,
well, he just also had contract negotiations for that job. And as part of it, it certainly sounds like he said, tell me kind of what the idea is going to be with this, because I don't want to sign on for something, which is smart. He's smart. So, yes, we'll share a clip of that later in the show. But, I mean, it was about an hour and a half conversation.
Yeah.
You know, probably a solid 30 about that topic. Yep. And then just an hour of, we talked Twins off season, but we also talked like, who are you, Cory Provus? Everybody's going to get a lot more of you, or TV people are. And let's talk about, you know, where you're from, what you did, how you got here, what it's like replacing some huge name in every market.
And what are the big challenges for moving from radio to TV? We spent a lot of the...
I thought that was the most interesting part. Is like almost like logistically or stylistically, like, the differences between announcing radio and announcing TV. And there's some stuff that's obvious, like, but there's some stuff he said, I was like, okay, yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed that.
That's a conversation I often had at spring training with Bramer.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the games with, you know, some of the games, at least in spring training, would be simulcast from radio to on TV, right? So, you know, and Bramer would be like, well, I mean, that kind of works, but it also kind of doesn't work. And we talk about that. It was interesting to hear Provus's take on that as well. So that was very good.
So, yes, but also if you want the full episode, Patreon, that spells Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman is how you can get that. And actually, if you sign up, you can listen to that one for free and the whole archive. We also I'll roll into this since this is our last show of 2023, last free show of 2023. Just want to say thank you to you guys. This was because of the Twins playoff run. Right. But even before that, it was a pretty fun.
Yeah.
I thought spring training was fun. I thought even the first half when they were up and down and 500-ish, there was a lot of interesting stuff to discuss. Obviously, for us, from our point of view, the fact that the audience for both the free show, I'll post the numbers. I always post them on Twitter at the end of the year, so like a few days from now. But I can give you a little preview, depending on how this episode does. We're up like 15, 18% per episode, basically downloads per new episode, which is amazing because we've had that growth essentially like every year. Right. And at some point, you know, it's not a limitless pool of Minnesota Twins fans. Do you know what I mean?
At some point, you think it's going to level out.
Right. There are companies that would be like, well, we want a 50%, but like at some point, you know,
we're very happy with whatever attention anybody wants to give us.
Right. And so to be at that point where we're, you know, still having pretty big, you know, double-digit plus year-over-year growth on this thing in year 12 or something like that of this podcast, and then beyond that, like we mentioned on the Patreon side, we're at like 4,000 paying Patreon subscribers at $1 an episode, which is just so far above and beyond what we ever imagined and what we even imagined a year ago or 2 years ago, let alone in 2019 when we launched the Patreon, we were shooting for like 400.
200.
Well, right. But I mean, like, we were like, if we could get 400 or 500 people, and now we're at, you know, 10x that. And I don't know. I say this a lot, but, you know, we're grateful for it. It's really, like I was joking about having this job and the podcast, but the podcast itself has become so much more than we ever envisioned when we sat down at Park Tavern and recorded an episode not knowing what we were doing in 2012, 2011?
2011. Yeah.
And, you know, we thought we can get an audience for this and it's fun and we like doing it. Yeah. I never imagined.
And we wanted to sort of explore that medium. I think both of us, I mean, it started essentially for the same reason we both started on our blogs. We didn't like the way, you know, the coverage was of baseball in a particular medium, and in the radio medium, we weren't thrilled with how
it was unsatisfying.
It was unsatisfying. Listen to Twins talk. It felt very surface level. It felt very hot takey. It felt very knee jerky. Yeah. a lot of ways. And we wanted to see, is there room for deepish dive baseball content in
from
this
two
market?
People who neither have radio voices nor radio experience. Is there room for that? Yeah. And it turns out miraculously that there is. So I just want to say thank you. for all the support, whether you listen once in a while to the free show, whether you listen to every Patreon and you're a subscriber from day one on that side. Like, it really has, I don't think it's crazy to say it's changed our lives, both. Like, obviously, it's been nice monetarily, but whatever on that. Like, just the idea of, I know John even more than me hears from people because John goes out in the world. But just, even sitting in the press box 80 times at Target Field a year, and just the people who walk by in that section who listen to the podcast, and I always get it's a little thrill to be like, hey, I'm a big podcast listener. So
that's a topic that came up when we talked with Provus as well a little bit. What is sort of the, we have an opportunity. He has an opportunity both on radio and TV, but I think we also have an opportunity to sort of grow the baseball community or grow the baseball knowledge and have it be let's have baseball at a different level, baseball coverage at a different level, and let's develop a fan base that's a little more educated on some of these things. I hope
we've done that. Yeah. As Dave St. Peter, not in a good way, once said to someone at a public event, "What are you, a Gleeman disciple?" we like Gleeman and bonus disciples. We like those. I always liked that one. I love when there's some public event or some private event, and then I get tweets. Our little spies that are out there. I love that. There was like Twins Christmas party, I guess, the other day. It might have been Monday after Provus talked to us, maybe. I don't remember. Or the day before, and people, I've heard all kinds of, well, here's what they said at the Christmas party. And it's like, okay. Not about us, just in general.
See, I've got different, my sources talk about baseball. Your sources talk about the gossip.
Well, I'm a messy bee who lives for gossip, as the saying goes, as the kids say. But I do love to gossip. I told people this at the winter meetings. People were telling me gossip about people I don't know and will never meet, and I'm just eating it up. I'm like, tell me more. Thank you to everyone for listening in 2023. Also, just the last decade plus. We're going to keep it rolling. John and I have also signed a long-term contract with each other.
That's right.
We go day to day. It's a 10-day contract, like the NBA.
Yeah. It's a game time decision.
But yeah, I think we're both certainly the playoff. I hate to call it a run, but for the Twins, that is a run for sure. The playoff run, I think, re-energized everybody, including us. Not that we were low on energy on the podcast, but it really, it gives you a new...
Well, also, the Correa signing, the Lopez Arias trade, there was a lot of stuff that went on this year.
There's been a lot to talk about.
Royce Lewis.
Which has set us up perfectly for this offseason where there is not a damn thing. Other than, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, well, mostly with the Dodgers.
They have decided the effing around is pretty much over.
Yeah. It is funny to think back the last 2 to 3 off seasons, I guess, with the Dodgers. I have to look a little more closely, but I know that a complaint from their fans and it's similar to complaints that the Yankees fans have had over the last 3 to 4 years, something like that, which is they weren't throwing around the full weight of their monetary advantage.
Well, especially last offseason, right? That was a complaint throughout the offseason. I think Correa expected the Dodgers to be involved in his bidding.
Right. Well, that might have been more about him getting booed every time he steps.
Well, that's a fair point.
But yes,
in general, they sat on the sidelines for a lot of what was going on last year, and it was a topic of the offseason. Like, why aren't the Dodgers doing it? And the answer seemed to be at the time they're keeping their powder dry for, at the time the thought process was Shohei Ohtani, but apparently it was also for Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto.
Yeah, they had a little more extra powder because, as we talked about, I guess it was on last week's free show, we talked a lot about the Ohtani, the unique structure of the Ohtani contract with 98% of the money being deferred a decade plus out, to the point that the present day value, as the Players Association or whatever determined, of a $700 million contract was what, $450 basically,
something like that.
And we talked about, well, why would they do that? There's some interesting tax ramifications potentially that he may have been interested in. But from the Dodgers standpoint, what it allowed them to do is, luxury tax wise, but also just in terms of present day outlay from their ownership, they're basically paying $45 million a year or the equivalent, or being kind of docked for $45 million a year or marked for $45 million a year on the luxury tax instead of $70. Well, that creates $25 million, $30 million, let's say, in sort of still available funds.
Right.
And that's essentially what they just gave to Yamamoto.
Right.
A 12-year, $325 million deal, which in itself is interesting because, I was kind of surprised that Ohtani's deal was only 10 years.
Right. But he is 29.
Sure, but we've seen older free agents.
We've seen them stretch it out because it allows them to, bring down the average value of that, which goes against the luxury tax. Right.
Now, the 12-year deal for Yamamoto, he's 25 or maybe turning 26, but
25,
that's significantly younger than any free agent will ever be in the American MLB system. Like even Bryce Harper, who was basically, or A-Rod back in the day, who debuted at 19. That's as quickly as you're going to get to free agency. Right. If you debut at 19 and you don't sign an extension, you'll get to free agency at 26, basically. He's there at 25 because the Japanese posting system, he can basically just opt out or asked to be posted. Right. And he debuted, I think, he might have been 18, 19, because he's pitched 7 years and he's 25. Right, yeah. He has 3 MVP awards, or 2 MVP awards and 3 Cy Young. They have whatever their equivalent of the Cy Young is. And so this was more of this type of deal. First of all, it's $1 million more than the previous largest ever contract for a pitcher, which was Garrett Cole, which is $324 million. Now, that was only 9 years. So this is less average annual money. Sure. So that's interesting. I'm sure that wasn't a coincidence. But this is more what we saw last offseason with like Bogarts and the initial Correa deal, which was 13 years with the Giants, the Trey Turner deal, where teams are signing guys to, it almost is like the NFL where there's like voidable deals or years at the end of a deal to stretch the money, and you'll just kind of deal with it when you get there. That's sort of what we're seeing, although realistically a 12-year deal for a 25-year-old. Right. Although I wouldn't bet on any pitcher necessarily making it to 37 or something like that, but he could, obviously. But the other interesting part, so 12 years, $325 million, that's just a massive, and along with the $700 for Ohtani, and would they give Glasnow $150 or something like that?
Something like that, $25 million a year, basically.
You're at 27. You're at 1.1 something billion dollars on those 3 pitchers. I mean, you're over $1 billion just on the 2 Japanese pitchers. Yep. Which is, yeah. I mean, I wonder at what point, how many years from now will the Minnesota Twins have spent $1 billion on cumulative free agents?
Right.
It's not yet.
Nope. No.
I can tell you that. No. And that's with Correa getting,
and they did it one off season.
Yeah, well, yeah, they did it in like a week and a half, basically. So yeah, I think that you can draw a clear link between the structure of Ohtani's deal and him pushing for that, and the PR element of that from his agency was he wanted to do that. I mean, it might have been true also, but he wanted to do that so that they could
and it's interesting
continue to add players. And then they added Japanese guy who he's clearly...
Who they're paying up front. They're actually giving him $50 million.
So this is the other interesting thing. 12 years,
it's the exact opposite. Right.
$325 million. 2 parts of that were interesting, which is, well, 3 maybe. First of all, that's only, I think it's like 30th in baseball in average annual dollars.
Okay, yeah. $27.5 million.
I mean, that's a lot, but Sonny Gray just got $25 million a year. Yeah. So that for a high-end starting pitcher, it's more the length than the. But then, like you said, he got a $50 million signing bonus, which is part of the $325. But then that just gets prorated, basically, or evenly distributed over the 12 years. So it counts as $4 million a year, something like that. Which is, I mean, that's a lot.
Right.
Whereas Ohtani took the opposite. He was like, I'll take it 15 years from now. And then the other part is, because he's coming directly from the Japanese league, there's a posting system, and it used to be there was a flat posting fee, or it could max out at $20 million or something. But now the posting fee is a percentage of the total contract, and I think there's
20%.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Well, it might maybe there's like a cap to it or something
like that.
But it's $51 million. They're paying to his previous team in Japan, which is very interesting from their standpoint. I mean, I don't know what a Japanese team's payroll is.
I don't either. I was just wondering that.
And I know that there are. I remember Masahiro Tanaka, who I think had the previous largest deal for a Japanese player coming over here when he came over to the Yankees like a decade ago. He was very good, but he went back to Japan when he was still not quite in his prime, but still could have signed a multi-year deal with the Yankees or whatever as a free agent, because they basically paid him not the same, but comparable at least money. So there are Japanese players making pretty big money over there, but I also know that when like an American player, a Williams Astudillo type, heads over to Japan, they tend to make $1 million, $1.5 million or something like that. So I'm assuming the payrolls there are a fraction of Major League payrolls, obviously, or at least the big ones. So $51 million. I mean, you could probably pay a whole season.
I would think
salaries.
so. I was wondering that. I wouldn't be shocked if that would cover the entire season. And then the other part about that is, which kind of ties into what I think there's going to. I bet we get a slew of stories between Christmas and New Year's about. Does Major League Baseball need a salary cap, right?
Yeah.
And the difficulties of running a small market team versus a large market team in Major League Baseball.
I think we're also seeing the gap between large market teams and supermarket teams now.
Well, maybe.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Like the gap between even like
Cardinals and the Mets.
Right. Well, honestly, like even the Giants and the Dodgers, which I think people have perceived as similar, and they're both huge markets who spend a lot of money. The Giants can't get people to take their money, and part of that, I don't know, I guess because the market itself.
So one of the things about this as well is that because the Dodgers are spending so much on this, and because even though Shohei Ohtani deferred his money, he's also bringing, the average annual value of that still gets end up putting into the luxury tax calculation, right? $47 million or something like that. The Dodgers have gone, and last year they managed to kind of keep their powder dry, but they were still paying some. They were still in the luxury tax.
They wanted
never
to dip under the
right?
last threshold, basically,
right.
the highest threshold,
Right.
Because there's repeater penalty.
So now they are in the second highest threshold as of right now because they've been above the luxury tax for 3 years in a row. The penalty, the tax in that threshold, in that level goes up and up and up. So there was another almost $20 million, I think, on top of the $325 million and the $50 million they have to pay for the poster fee. They're also paying another $20 million on top of. So this is really to them, it's a $390. It's a $400 million contract.
Right.
And the luxury tax has become, I think, significantly more aggressive over the past. We've been talking about wanting, a salary cap since the collective bargaining agreements in 2002. We were wondering whether or not the Twins would get contracted and such, right?
I can tell you, I was born in 1983, so I was probably aware of this in the mid-'90s. Since I became aware of such things in the mid-'90s, people have been moaning about baseball not having a salary cap.
Well, all the other sports have basically kind of moved to that, right?
Except Premier League soccer, which I think is becoming sort of similar in some ways, where there are mega teams.
That's right, yeah.
There are strong teams, and then there are some teams, and this is kind of what I worry about.
NCAA football is the new one that's going to be going that direction.
That's true, too. But I worry, not that I know a lot about Premier League. Most of what I know from Premier League is I have one friend who's a Chelsea fan, and sometimes I go drink in the morning and watch those games. Hi, Dana. He's coming over to my house tomorrow night to watch a Bills game for some reason. I don't know why. You're welcome to come over too if you'd like to.
All right, good to know.
But I worry that there are teams in the Premier League, and obviously it's different because there's relegation as a component and everything, so that's not apples to apples. But I worry that there are teams in that because there's the spectrum of spending is so absurd in that. With Chelsea at the top or other teams that, and then some teams are just sort of spending the minimum. There are some teams who are our goal is to finish, 10th.
Right.
And that's a successful season. And it's a little different in baseball. That's never going to be quite how it is in baseball because the playoff structure leads to less certainty.
Yeah,
and,
that's a good point.
You can get the Diamondbacks on a run.
Right.
But I worry with teams like, Pittsburgh or Kansas City or something like that. Or at some point, the Twins. The Twins have been in this situation a couple decades ago, obviously, where it's they're not even really shooting for championships, and on some level, even maybe division. If you're in the Dodgers division, and you're I would say the Diamondbacks, but they just made the World Series. So thank God for the playoff element, kind of throwing chaos into the mix. But I worry that what's going to happen, even the regular season is obviously affected, but I worry that there's some teams that are just we'll trot out a $70 million payroll. which is equal to what the Dodgers are paying one guy, and then we'll just kind of hope for an 80-win season. And for us, that's a big accomplishment. I worry that it's like headed
it could
sort
be
of towards that.
I think that's a legitimate concern, but I think it was a legitimate concern 20 years ago. And they have.
Sure.
I think what we're seeing is that they are putting in – the collective bargaining agreement is becoming increasingly penalty laden for teams that are trying to do that. You know, if the Dodgers spend like another $7 million, everything they spend on a free agent past that is taxed at 110%. Right?
Yes.
But I wonder if even though that is becoming more and more stringent, and even though that, you know, the luxury tax number, more and more teams are kind of running into that luxury tax number. It used to be like one team, two teams. Now it's like 5, 6 teams, right? I still wonder, like, if the real true super teams, it's still kind of like, yeah, but it's just money.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
They're still making money. And I think it's more – what you're saying is true. Like, they've obviously put in more levels to it, and the penalties themselves. We talked about this with the Mets and Steve Cohen last offseason, which ironically –
And to some extent, you can see it working sometimes. Like, you can see the Padres backing down after trying to jump in there, right?
How do I phrase it? They're all punitive, not restrictive. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They're all you did this.
There's an incentive, but there's not a rule.
It's like you're saying to the Dodgers, you spent so much money and you made your team so good. Now you have to pay the penalty. Whereas a salary cap, is you can't spend that money and can't make it that good. Right. And those are totally different things. Because to your point, if you're the Dodgers owners or you're Steve Cohen, who's the 3 times as rich as any billionaire owning another team. Right. You can say to him, well, hey, if you get your payroll up to 280 here, if you add another reliever here and get it to 280, you're going to be paying $1.75 on any dollar you spend.
You're going to be paying $2.10 on every dollar, right? Yeah.
That's meaningless to him. I mean, effectively. Like, he's going to have some cutoff in his head, but when you have $50 billion, what is $50 million? It's nothing. We've talked about this before. And so I agree that
it is something that Major League Baseball seems to try to be reining in. It's certainly the Major League Baseball Players Association does not want them to rein it in.
Well, right. They just want free spending, uncapped spending. So this gets to why I think we're going to see like another, if we maybe have already seen it, but another higher class emerge, because it used to be small market, mid market, high market, or super teams or whatever it is. But now we're seeing like the Dodgers now, I would say, obviously are the first team that has like elevated themselves from a spending or from just a power standpoint above even like the Red Sox, let's say, or the Giants, or even the Yankees at some point.
Yeah. I think the Dodgers are clearly
where it's like, and I think the Mets envision themselves as this at some point, or have tried to kind of do this, because there's just
that's their vision for sure.
Right. The pure wealth involved, like, the people who own the Cardinals or the people who even own the Red Sox, they're ridiculously wealthy. You can never tax them enough to, affect their bottom line, basically. But they do install like limits, whereas like the group that owns the Dodgers, I mean, they're just so unfathomably wealthy as a collective. Or Steve Cohen, there's no amount of money he could spend on a baseball team that would ever dent his bottom line. So I feel like you're going to get even more stratification there, where it's like you have teams that are willing to go nuts within the context of baseball, which is like Red Sox, Giants, even Yankees, maybe. But then there's teams, or at least a team right now, the Dodgers, that are willing to go nuts outside of the context of baseball. Or in the Mets, I think eventually will be like this too, where they're just willing to go nuts within the context of the world.
Right.
And that is so much bigger even. You can have a $300-something million payroll, and Major League, whereas the Giants might have a $200 million payroll.
Right.
And you can say, if you're Major League Baseball, well, we've put all these guardrails in place and we're going to tax you $2 on every dollar spent at this point. And at the end of the year, like you said, you're going to get a bill for $85 million. What is $85 million? Nothing. Right. It's nothing. And so that is maybe I think that happening, if that plays out more extreme over the next 5 to 10 years, let's say, which I think it will, that I think will actually be the impetus or the push towards a true salary cap. And here's why. The teams that will be upset about what I'm talking about, sort of a higher level of super team spending, are the teams that were previously the big market teams, Red Sox, Giants, whatever.
Right.
And when they start to complain, Major League Baseball and the Players Association will listen to it. Yeah. Much more so than if the Minnesota Twins or the Cleveland Guardians or the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Kansas City Royals.
I think if you ask the Dodgers right now, do you want a salary cap? They'd be like, yeah, let's sign up for a salary cap.
No, I don't think
I think they would because they're guaranteed making that. They're still going to have that revenue, that huge revenue number on the other side.
They will make significantly more money.
I think all of the Major League Baseball owners would sign up for a salary cap right now.
I think the majority would. But what I'm saying is, I still think the Dodgers are going to make money.
Well, I know. But they'd be making even more. And then they wouldn't have to worry about being bitched at about they're not overspending their money, or they wouldn't have to worry about fan reaction.
They wouldn't. I don't know. But the salary cap removes their competitive advantage.
Yeah, it does.
Not completely, but it really removes a lot of it.
Yes, right.
And so if you're the Dodgers, you can have both right now. You can spend an ungodly amount of money, even relative to the other big market teams. You can still turn a profit because they're getting like $300 million a year in television money.
Right,
I mean, and they sell. Dodger Stadium sells out 60,000 a game for 81 games. You know you're going to have huge playoff revenue because you got a super team every year. You know all this stuff, and you get the national money. You get obviously you can sell your TV rights to Japan now for a huge amount. You got 2 superstars from Japan, so there's all this, and so they can make money there. But also they have maximized a competitive advantage, so you get the best of both worlds. What I think is teams on the second super team level cannot have both worlds. They cannot spend an ungodly amount and have the full competitive advantage. I suspect 10 years from now.
I'm sure the Giants and Cardinals and those teams are really Red Sox maybe are very disappointed in how this is going. Don't get me wrong. Right. I just don't think ultimately the resistance to any sort of salary cap is the MLBPA, and it has been a line in the sand. They have been willing to move that line in the sand as much as to allow incentives or to allow penalties, but they're never going to get to the point where they're going to be like, no, you're just not setting it.
So. Well, and it's in some ways tough to argue with them when 2 guys just got $1 billion.
Right.
On the other hand, I think a salary cap would probably lead to a similar amount of total money spent on players, but distributed in a much more sort of.
Yeah. We just went through an off-season lockout over exactly this issue, and they got nothing done. So
before we talk about some actual Twin stuff,
let's talk a little bit about a couple of our favorite sponsors. HelloFresh. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed having HelloFresh waiting for me when we came back from our recent trip to Europe. It got delivered that day, and so we went there. We also just had give a shout out to Nick Nelson, who got hit by. We thought about sending him HelloFresh as a get well soon stuff. He got hit by a car. He's got a broken foot or something.
They're out to get Nick. I don't know who they are, but somebody.
Anyway, HelloFresh just makes
delivered right to your door.
Yes.
The way it works is whether you can actually cook like the bonuses or you can't cook like the Gleemans. It works for both because I can tell you as a household who neither of us cook, but we kind of like the idea of eating a little healthier and actually
doing stuff together.
Cooking,
right.
I feel that way. She might not feel that way. No. They send you all the ingredients kind of parceled out.
Right.
The right amounts, fresh.
Yep.
HelloFresh. Delivered right to you. What needs to be cold is delivered cold.
Right.
It's portioned out. But then also they send you step-by-step instructions, and you might say, well, isn't that just a recipe? But it's beyond a recipe.
Right.
There's pictures so that I know what ginger looks like. So when it says slice some ginger, I'm not like, what?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And you end up with, whether you have a decent ability to cook or zero, you end up with very Instagrammable plates.
So good.
You've probably seen John tweet about them where it's here, we made pork loin, and it's like, wow, that looks
looks almost like it does in the picture.
Yeah, right, yeah. And it gets delivered to you. You can choose, meat-based items. They have a new menu every week. You can choose family items. If you got kids involved, you can choose vegetarian items. You can choose healthier items, all that stuff. HelloFresh, and here they have a deal. If you go to HelloFresh.com/GleemanFree,
all one word, Gleeman Free,
and use the code GleemanFree, GleemanFree, you get free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box the entire time your subscription to HelloFresh is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/Gleeman free with the code Gleeman free.
I should just mention I've had some of these breakfasts. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
They've got both like muffins, and then they also have like breakfast sandwiches that you can just heat up. It takes like a minute and a half. They were fantastic. So
America's number one meal kit. And then here's our next sponsor. We have had them in the past this time of year. They are a perfect sponsor for our audience on what is today?
Well, here,
December 22nd.
I don't want to talk past the most important part. The most important part is that this is a great service. Like, it's just a great freaking
for kind
thing
of
to do.
bringing families together.
Right. So
which we'll talk about.
The name of it is Storyworth, right? And Storyworth, what they do is they allow you to kind of get to know some of the relatives that you don't know as well as you should, including like your parents,
right?
Or your grandparents or something.
So you can sign them up for this as a gift. And the beauty of it is it's not a physical gift initially.
Right.
And so you might be saying to yourself, Christmas is in 2 days. Perfect gift. You've been waiting.
December 22nd.
If you're a doofus
right
like
now.
me.
Yeah, exactly right. That's the other beautiful part about it.
So you can sign them up, and what it is they'll get sort of prompted email questions about their life.
Right.
And some of them might just be like, what was your first job? But some of it is a little deeper, a little more uncommon, and it kind of gets them telling stories that they maybe haven't even told or even thought about in decades. Right. And then at the end of the year, first of all,
gathered.
During the year, your family can read those as they submit them if you want.
That's right.
But then at the end of the year, you can put it together in like physical book form, and then that's like sort of a second gift, and then you can give that to other family members too. And then it's almost like an autobiography. It's like you've sort of push them into writing about their life in ways that they never would have done it before. So, and like I said, it's a perfect gift for the holidays. Still, with Storyworth, you're giving those you love a thoughtful, personal gift from the heart, preserving their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/Gleeman, and you can save $10 on your first purchase. That's Storyworth, WORTH, Storyworth.com/Gleeman to save $10 on your first purchase.
Great thing for several siblings to go in together for, get to know their parents or grandparents better. So
I don't have several siblings. I don't even have one. Imagine if I had a sibling. They'd probably be really annoying.
I would like to meet a sibling of yours, actually.
I don't know. Brother or sister, you think?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I think a sister.
She'd be a very hairy woman. You know what I mean?
I'm betting she would be strikingly attractive.
Well, yeah.
And then you'd be like, ugh.
Oh, like I'd have to like beat up her boyfriends when we were growing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I always wanted a sibling.
Oh.
But I couldn't even get.
They weren't that great, just FYI.
Jeff Bonus is a saint. I've met this man.
He listens to
one of the greatest people I've ever met.
Had a great time with him in Vegas. It was great.
I like all siblings of the original 4 Twins Daily people as much or better than the Twins Daily founders themselves. What do you think about that?
That's pretty. Yeah, that's true. I like Seth's brother.
Great guy, comes to our events.
Yep.
Parker's sister.
Yep.
I've had some great night outs with.
Right. Nick's
brother, Joshua.
Yeah.
Jasha. Sorry. Has in the past given me so many free drinks at Nightingale before, and is a great guy. And you 4 are, you guys are all right. Siblings. So I guess that proves what you're saying. Is if I had a sibling, they'd be much cooler than me, and people would like them a lot more than me. So yeah, that'd be interesting. Okay.
Talk about some Twin stuff.
Yeah.
Let's start with the center fielders. Nothing really projected.
I left this up to John.
Yeah.
Dealer's choice on the topic.
Right.
So at the winter meetings in Nashville, there was a lot of talk about a few things, which we covered. But one of the things was kind of a renewed sense of optimism, I guess, with Byron Buxton.
Right.
And I will tell you that when I heard that from Baldelli in person and I heard that from Derek Falvey in person, my initial reaction was, I'm guessing what everyone who just heard me say, the phrase renewed sense of optimism with Byron Buxton's
Don't
initial
roll your eyes
reaction.
visibly. Don't roll your eyes visibly. Don't roll your eyes visibly.
I have a problem with that in general. The beat has
That's exactly what they're
back when we used to do Zoom interviews in 2020 and 2021. I had a major problem with rolling my eyes, both at my fellow writers' questions, which
what's the worst?
they didn't like that very much.
That's
one
right.
of them in particular, and then with the responses from players and coaches and stuff, and I'd be like, turns out when you're on a Zoom and it's being recorded by the team, they tend to notice if there's one jerk in the high upper right-hand corner with his eyes rolling out of his head. Anyway, but you probably had that reaction when you heard the phrase renewed sense of optimism with Byron Buxton. And I had the similar reaction in Nashville when they were talking about that. They had that reaction too. I mean, they're aware of the situation. It's not like they're coming to this blind. And so it's all relative. You know, when they say, well, it stems from Buxton had his first post-surgery checkup, would have been now 3 weeks ago, let's say, 3-4 weeks ago, in Minneapolis with the team doctors and all that. And things are going well, or things were going well back then. And he's kind of cleared for normal off-season work, which means he can work out, which is different than the year before when he was not cleared for that and, in fact, showed up to spring training and was still well behind where he already is now, which is part of the reason there's optimism now. Now, with that said, you know, we know better at this point. We've heard this story or versions of this story before, and the Twins are aware of that. I'm sure deep down Buxton is aware of that too. He wasn't at the winter meeting, so we didn't talk to him. But so it's all relative. When I say, you know, there's a renewed sense of optimism, and I think part of that I could sense was for the first time since really like mid-2022, they were talking about him as a center fielder. Right. And last year, that just never really happened until basically September when they started talking about him as center fielder, not because they thought he was like able or had more gotten closer to actually being physically capable of playing center field, just because they were running out of time and they just thought, what the hell, we'll see.
Right. Let's just see what happens.
And it didn't work, obviously. Now they're talking about him again as a center fielder. I think part of that is because they're encouraged by the early check-in post-surgery. And part of it is because it didn't work to make him a full-time DH last year. And so that is no longer, I don't want to say a possibility, but that is no longer sort of a plan or a option. And so then
it didn't keep him healthy.
Right. That's what I mean.
Right,
he wasn't productive.
Right.
He didn't really seem to love it from a just like staying in the game standpoint.
Of course, right.
And he didn't stay really any healthier.
No.
And so, or at least he didn't progress from a health-wise standpoint where he can move off DH.
I think the thought process was we're going to keep him here until he gets healthy, and then we'll eventually,
then
hopefully we'll have him in center field by the postseason. Right. And then finally in September, they're like, I don't know, let's just put him in center field.
Right. You know, and that lasted half a game in St. Paul, basically.
Right.
And so because of that, you know, and when I say they're aware of the, you know, the eye roll aspect of this, this wasn't like on the record, but a couple of different Twins officials basically said, I don't know, 80 games in center field?
Right.
That would be great. You know, sort of halftime in center field. You throw in some work at DH, maybe pinch runs a few times. That gets you to 100 and something games. I mean, it's unfortunate that that's what you're shooting for in someone's age 30 season, which he just turned 30 the other day. But that's, I think, realistic. I mean, it's not realistic at this point, or really at any point in Byron Buxton's history, but certainly right now, to say, we want him in center field for 140 games. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you'd love that, but that's not realistic. And so and they'll know more at Twins Fest, I would say, because he'll be in town for that.
Right.
And they'll check him up again.
Yes.
I mean, they're keeping tabs on him, but that's like the next time that he'll be in town. Yeah. And then obviously the big one will be when he reports to training.
That's also about the time they made the move for Michael A. Taylor last year.
Well, this is part of it too, which is they
traded for him like January 24th or something. We looked it up or something. Yeah.
Their patient nature in general with off seasons, the Twins front office, I mean, is I think being forced even more down that path because they don't have any money to spend. So they're kind of trying to let things play out with everyone else. But it does kind of fit with Buxton's situation, which is every week that you can kind of kick the can down the road on the center field situation gives you another week or another month to evaluate Buxton's readiness or capabilities or just overall health. And so if you had...
And it's been a slow developing center field market, too.
True. Nobody's signed yet.
Moon did. Right? That's... the Japanese player came over and played
Korean.
for the Giants. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Korean. Yes, you're right.
But he was never going to sign with the Twins. And,
Right.
But like Cody Bellinger is unsigned.
Right.
Kevin Kiermaier, Michael A. Taylor, who obviously played for the Twins, and Harrison Bader. And there really hasn't been, from a trade standpoint, center fielders changing teams. If they had to decide today who's your opening, I mean, if the season started today, basically, I know that's a cliche, but if they had to decide today who's your center fielder, well, there'd be too much uncertainty to say it's Byron Buxton. Right. So you'd either have to say, well, it's Willie Castro, or it's Nick Gordon, or it's Austin Martin, or you would have to make a move today for a Michael A. Taylor.
Some combination of those players.
But if you can wait a month and the market itself is still, maybe Bellinger signs, but maybe one or two of the other guys are still unsigned, or whatever trade targets they've identified haven't been traded yet, well, then that allows you to evaluate Buxton with more information. Right. Basically, you can reveal more information in that time. So I do think that kind of fits their approach to it anyway. But it does make it difficult, whether it's today, whether it's a month from now, whether it's in spring training. At some point, you're going to have to just say, do we actually think Byron Buxton can play center field on opening day for 80 games, for 50 games, whatever it is? And you're going to have to act accordingly, right? And so that affects who you have on your bench with like Castro, Gordon, and that type. It affects how you handle prospects. Is Austin Martin the opening day center fielder? Well, that's a lot different than sending him to St. Paul as a midseason call-up. Are you trying to talk about someone like Michael Hellman or Deshaun Kersey or something like that as an emergency type center fielder? Right. Or do you go out and sign Michael A. Taylor or Kevin Kiermaier and you say Buxton's a part-time player now, or honestly isn't even being counted on to be on the active roster? Willie Castro's a backup. Nick Gordon's on the roster bubble. Austin Martin's at AAA, and these other guys are completely out of the picture. Like,
or do you go and trade for somebody like you did last year, like somebody who's a bottom 10 center fielder in terms of offensive production, but a decent? Because here's the thing, Baldelli was a center fielder. Yes. He cares about center field. It's one of those things where I'm getting the sense that Kiermaier is interested in the Twins in part because Baldelli is there. He's got.
I joked about this with Baldelli on day 2 of the winter meetings, when I was asking them about Castro and Gordon and Martin and all these guys, kind of what do you think about these guys in center? Like, could you live with so-and-so being your primary center fielder? Could you live with so-and-so? And it's a much different vibe from Baldelli on that topic than it is from Falvey or anybody else in the organization, even from a scouting side when you talk to him, because Rocco Baldelli was himself an exceptional center fielder. As fast as anybody.
He doesn't have a lot of patience for bad play in center field, right? Yeah.
And it's not because he has anything against any of these players specifically, but Byron Buxton is the one guy they've had in center field, where Rocco Baldelli
Taylor replaced him.
And Michael Tayller replaced him.
Yeah.
And it's like where Rocco Baldelli, I mean, he sung those guys' praises endlessly, especially Taylor last year.
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think we thought, oh, well, Michael Taylor was the center fielder because Michael Taylor was available. Right, that's what, and hits right-handed and blah blah blah. There's some. He's got something, and those were true. More and more now that I take a look at that, I think they were targeting Michael Taylor because they're like, I want a really good center fielder.
We at least know the defense will not be a drop off. Really, and we saw that. I mean, he was exceptional in center field. He's a great center fielder, and so I think that plays a part. Whereas if you ask Falvey about the same players, well, he views it more as an all-around topic. Where he'll say like, well, I don't know that I want fill in the blank starting 100 games defensively in center field, but if they make the minimum salary and they can be an asset offensively, the overall package from a value standpoint can be similar to Michael Taylor. Whereas Baldelli's like, well, I just want a really good center fielder. And so that's the push and pull of a manager versus a front office and all that stuff.
That's right, yeah.
Now, it just so happens that other than Cody Bellinger, who's not signing with the Twins, obviously he's going to get $150 million or something like that.
But
next 3,
he wants over $200 million, and I'm wondering how long it's going to take for him to sign, and at what point do the other center fielders say, we're not going to wait for him to sign and then take the leftovers. We're just going to go out and get, as soon as we can get a good 2-year deal or a 3-year deal, we're going to take it.
But the 3 kind of mid-level or lower-level free agent center fielders, Michael A. Taylor, Kevin Kiermaier, Harrison Bader. I think they've all won Gold Gloves. They're certainly in all Gold Glove calibers. I don't know if Bader's won one. Kevin Kiermaier, I would say, is probably
the center fielder who's better than Buxton.
The best center fielder of the past decade, I would say. I mean, just cumulatively, like Buxton.
Defensively, you mean?
Yes, defensively. And he's just amazing. He's like 32, but he's still amazing. Right. Michael A. Taylor has won a Gold Glove, and we saw last year still at a very, very high level. Harrison Bader is, maybe a half step below that level, but, he's a great defender. Hasn't hit much in the last couple of years.
All three of the free agents seem like that kind of player, right?
Which is kind of interesting.
The problem is that at least two of those free agents are definitely going to be probably in line for a multi-year deal from somebody.
I like the phrasing on that. Definitely, probably.
Definitely, probably.
Yeah. Well, that was when
they are certainly fishing for a
at the beginning of the offseason. Not at the very beginning. Once the talk of the payroll going down, which was like maybe a couple weeks into the offseason, whatever. We started looking at the center field market and those same three guys, basically.
Right, yes.
Taylor being a potential re-sign, and saying, well, yeah, I mean, on a 1-year deal, all those guys would make sense potentially. Right. Kevin Kiermaier 1 year, I don't know, $12 million. Right. Michael Taylor 1 year, $9 million. Harrison Bader 1 year, I don't know, $4 or $5 million. That all makes sense, but they're all 32, 33, which you don't want to invest in a speed and athleticism-based player at a position like that, a multi-year deal into their kind of mid-30s if you can avoid it. And then beyond that, it's not necessarily clear that they'll have the need a second year, which is like if you give Michael A. Taylor a 2-year, $20 million deal, I'm not saying he's not worth that money in a vacuum.
Right.
I think there are teams,
lots of teams,
and situations for whom he is worth that.
Yes.
But how confident are you that he's not going to lose a step defensively? Because as much power as he showed at the bottom of the lineup, he was a below average all around hitter last year. And if he loses a step defensively, he's suddenly not a low end starter. He's a backup basically. But then beyond that, well, what if Buxton is reasonably healthy?
Right.
Or what if Austin Martin is a legit center fielder?
Exactly.
And then year 2, you're paying Michael A. Taylor $11 million guaranteed, and he's not even really your best option out there, or maybe even your second best option. So that's a factor. Now, and obviously the money is a factor. I mean, right now the Twins are probably pretty close to, if not at, their self-imposed payroll limit. And so even to sign a guy like Michael A. Taylor or Kevin Kiermaier or even Harrison Bader for that matter, you'd have to trade away someone to clear that. And so I don't know that if you were to trade away Polanco, let's say, Kepler, Vasquez, Farmer, to clear $8 million, $10 million, whatever it is, to bring in someone at that price, I don't know that center field would be number one on that list.
Of course not.
Do you know what I mean? Starting pitcher would be number one on that list. And I could maybe make the argument that like a right-handed bat might be number 2 on that.
And I would suggest that, that the Twins certainly have that priority in them. And I think what they're spending most of their time this offseason is that starting pitching market. I think they are
trade market.
Yeah, in particular the trade market, right? That the free agent market is going at a higher dollar level and year level than they were going to want to get into, and
always, but especially now.
I mean, that's been a recurring theme with the Twins, right? Another recurring theme with the Twins is that they're not afraid to trade some prospects for a really good pitcher, and so if they're going to end up making a deal for a pitcher, I think that'll be via the trade market. And I think if they're going to make a big trade, it's going to be for a pitcher. They're going to keep their powder dry for
I agree with that. Yeah. Now, that doesn't necessarily preclude something from kind of, I don't want to say falling into the laps, but like...
Taylor was available last year for a relief pitcher, right? Like a double-A relief pitcher,
if these guys are wanting... I talked to a Twins official in Nashville about the free agent pitching market along these lines, where even guys like, Frankie Montas or, Tyler Mahle at the time, they were early in the offseason saying, well, we want a 2-year, 3-year deal, even though we're sort of reclamation project guys. Some of them got it. Tyler Mahle got the 2-year deal. Some of them are still out there. Some of them are going to end up signing 1-year deals. The Twins standpoint, or the Twins perspective on it was, well, that's not feasible to us at all. And so we have no choice but to wait that out.
Right.
If even the reclamation project kind of 1 year flyer guys are wanting 2 year and 3 year deals at premium prices, well, we're not even in that market. So all we can say to agents on that is come back to us in a month if you haven't found that, and then we can talk. And I think that's to a lesser degree probably true in center field, which is, like you said, Michael A. Taylor and Kevin Kiermaier, and hell, I don't know, maybe even Harrison Bader might be saying, I want a 2 year deal. I want a 3 year deal. Who knows? Right. They're still good players. Well, that's, I don't think, and it shouldn't be, at least in my view, feasible for the Twins.
Right.
So all they can say to them is, check back with us in 3 weeks if that's no longer the case.
Right.
If you've realized there isn't a 2 year deal for you, and maybe we can do a 1 year and an option, or maybe we can pay a little more of a premium on a 1 year deal. And so while they don't clearly have money for that even, 1 year, 10 million, 12 million or whatever, that becomes a little easier to work with if Kevin Kiermaier says to them, all right, forget the 2 and 3 year deal stuff. That market didn't materialize in a way I wanted. How about a 1 year, 12 million?
Here's I'll ask you this question and I'll then give you my answer as well. 3 options, right? They end up signing a free agent to play center fielder.
Right.
They end up trading for a center fielder.
Uh-huh.
They end up not doing anything.
Someone who's already in the organization.
Somebody in the organization.
Right.
They cobble something together.
Right.
Which is the most likely? Which is the least likely?
I think in the organization is by far the most likely.
You think they essentially do nothing?
Well, yeah. I think there are some scenarios where even if you traded for someone or signed a low-level guy, that Buxton is still the opening day center fielder.
Sure,
he's in the organization.
Right.
And then you
I'm not saying who's the opening day center fielder. My question is, do they make an off-season move to handle? Do they make a 40-man roster addition? Right. That is a center fielder. Do they not make one? Or if they do make one, is it a trade or a signing?
Right. Well, I would say, I guess not make one is what I would say the most likely. Because you have Buxton, who, let's be honest, whether it's free agency or trade, they're not getting anyone who's as good as even a sort of healthy Byron Buxton.
And what's the least likely?
Boy.
I think I would say signing a free agent.
Yeah, I guess signing. Although, I just don't. I don't think they're going to cross. I don't think they're going to cross the boundary of 1 year versus 2 year deal. Right.
And then the question becomes: will all 3 of those guys get a 2 year deal, or will Bader? First?
I could see Bader 1 year, $4 million or something.
I could see that.
Them signing him and just saying he's the 4th outfielder, he can be the center fielder or whatever because he's right-handed. But yeah, I guess I would view a trade as more likely than re-signing Taylor or signing Kiermaier.
Yeah.
But again, if a month from now they're still out there and a 2 year deal has not materialized from the Twins or elsewhere, which I think is somewhat possible, at least for one, if not both of those guys, I personally wouldn't sign them to a 2 year deal. So maybe 30 teams feel that way. I don't know. Or the 10 teams that need a center fielder feel that way. Then, yeah, I think they've shown an ability. Part of being patient is at the end of that patience, you have to be willing to adjust. To what the layout of the market, what that patience has sort of caused to shake out. And if being patient leaves Kevin Kiermaier there on a 1 year, $12 million deal, well, that's probably more than you were planning to spend in center field. Right. But you can say, well, okay, is that worth moving this guy, bringing that in? That solves a problem, and then we're stronger.
I think if they can get if they can get Taylor or Kiermaier on a 1 year deal, that's obviously their solution.
Right.
I just don't think they're going to be able to get.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So. I think they would like to, and then the trade one is a little trickier. I could see a trade like in spring training almost, or because the trade to me would be more. Buxton, it's not going to work for him.
Right.
We don't want to.
We want one more person who's a part of this mix who's played center field every day in the major league, or regularly in the major leagues for the last 2 years.
You just trade for like a 4th outfielder type who can play some center field or something like that. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
That's what I thought was the most likely.
Obviously, they love Taylor as a player, and also he was very well. He's sort of a strong silent type. Yeah, I would say, but he seemed very well liked. Right. He's a very smart guy. I like talking to him. And he played really well. They like him. Kiermaier and Baldelli go back to the Rays org together when Baldelli was like a scout and a coach and a front office guy with them. And you can't. I
wouldn't be shocked if Baldelli is heavily pushing for Kiermaier, and Kiermaier is going back to his agent saying, we've got a 2 year offer on the table. from somebody, but I would much rather be with the Twins. Let's see if we can get them to go to 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way.
And Paul Daly's like, yeah, we should just go to 2.
If you watched a young Kevin Kiermaier play center field every day, which Rocco Baldelli did as a member of the Rays, you couldn't have come away from that you can't,
untouched.
Right. You're enamored because he's just incredible. Yeah. And even at 32, 33, he remains, I mean, his metrics are great.
Unbelievable.
The eye test is great.
He'll save you 25, 30 runs. He has had years where he's saved 25,
and last year he was actually pretty decent offensively. I mean, he's similar to he's a very different stylistically than Taylor in that Taylor is swing at everything, high strikeout rate, but he can pop 15, 20 homers. Right. Kiermaier is more of a left-handed hitter, kind of a slash hitter, makes more contact, has a little bit of power. But the end result is, they're an 8th or 9th place hitter. They're an asset for a lineup. As a 5th or 6th place or top of the lineup guy, they're not somebody you want there. So it's a similar equation. Okay, before we talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about BetterHelp, or one of our sponsors, BetterHelp. We're big believers in BetterHelp because I know when you need to talk to somebody and you finally allowed yourself to talk to somebody about various problems you're working through or things that you're confused about.
When you come back from the holidays and you realize why you are the way you are after you've spent time with your family.
That's right.
And you want to talk to someone about that, BetterHelp can be a perfect solution for that. They can set you up with real licensed therapists. And the thing I like about it is, if you want to do a video chat, you do a video chat. If you don't want to be on camera, you do a phone call. If you're a weirdo like me and you hate talking on the phone, you can do a live chat and just talk to type to them. They can set it up. It's typically a lot quicker to schedule and set up than seeing a therapist in person can be.
It can be more affordable.
It can be more affordable too.
That's right. And so in this season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Just visit betterhelp.com/Gleeman today. And you're going to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/Gleeman. Also,
Stamps.com.
Speaking of giving,
I
bet you a lot of you have had a chance to stop by the post office sometime in the last 3 or 4 weeks.
And that will make
How'd that go for you?
That will make you never want to do that again. And a good way to avoid having to go to the post office is to use Stamps.com. I was a Stamps.com power user for about 6 months a few years ago, sending out autographed copies of my book. So I really learned, this was before they were a sponsor. I learned the value.
A service is great if Aaron actually signs up for manual, tedious labor.
Yeah, that's true.
It's got to be a great service if he's willing to do that.
The way it works is you can print your own postage and your own labels. And the thing I valued is you can track it with like serial numbers and everything, so you know when stuff is delivered. So that allows you then to just drop stuff in the mailbox or in your building or whatever it is. That's what I did. So you can avoid going to the post office. You can also avoid being overcharged for postage because you can actually measure it out. And in fact, with this deal, they will send you a free digital scale so you can get the exact postage. So you're not just slapping on 9 stamps and paying twice what you need to pay. You can track it. It's just super easy to do. So whether you're individual or you have a little home business, which is more and more people are doing, you can give that the gift of Stamps.com so your mailing and shipping is covered this holiday season and beyond. Sign up with the promo code GEEK, different, not Gleeman, Geek, Geek, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage, and like I said, they will send you a digital scale too.
That's amazing.
No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com and click on the microphone graphic at the top of the page, and then enter in the code GEEK, Geek, Stamps.com.
We mentioned at the beginning of the show how we had a conversation with Cory Provus on Patreon. We also mentioned a little bit about the TV money that the Dodgers have and how that is a factor in these large market teams. And so, one of the big questions, not just regarding payroll, which we've discussed a lot on here, but also just like, how are we going to watch the games next year has been the Twins TV deal for 2024, right? Yeah. We talked to Cory right after there was sort of a ruling about the bankruptcy of
Diamond
Sports
and Bally.
Right. That plays partly into the various machinations that are going beyond the scenes. There's been lots of reports about the Twins potentially going back to Bally for a 1-year deal. There was a Zoom call in the winter meeting, when Cory Provus came on board about what could be blacked out or not blacked out on streaming. We basically wanted to have a conversation with Cory Provus, somebody close to it,
Yes,
to kind of wrap everything into a bow, right? And so we
grilled him.
We grilled him.
Put him under the lights.
That's right. And so you're about to listen to about a 13-minute clip about Cory Provus kind of discussing what he knows about the Twins TV deal, some of the directions he thinks it's going to be going, and this is the sort of thing that you'll get in a Patreon, as well as if we end up doing any emergency podcast during the
Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. This is the type of thing you will get.
Speaking of something new, let's hear what we talked a little bit before we started about what we think is going to be happening with the Twins broadcast. I know we don't know what is going to be happening with the Twins broadcast. What are you hearing, and what can you share about what you know about what's going on? I understand there was a big court ruling on Friday that some things are going to be extended. Can you bring our listeners?
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to get some more clarity in early January. I think January 10th or 12th, around that time, I think is the next date to look out for. And I think once that next, because all this is taking place in federal bankruptcy court in Houston. Where it was the center of everything back in June,
right?
When all this
Phil
really
Miller happened to be,
right?
That's right. Show up in court.
The Twins were there. The Twins were there too.
Yeah,
right.
Dave St. Peter testified at the trial.
The Twins were just, oddly enough, the schedule had them down in Houston during that time period.
But just so people know, we've tried to make this clear because if you're just a Twins fan, you're saying with Bally or now the situation where they're just sort of in limbo. A lot of it is so far beyond the Twins' control that they're just one of, I think, 15 teams or something like that was controlled by Bally. Now they happen to be a free agent, but there are 14 other, I want to say, something like that, 10 to 15 other, let's call it, teams that are still under contract with Bally. But the thing you're talking about is they've determined that the next sort of I don't know if it's a trial or a hearing or whatever, is going to be early
January.
January.
Term sheet. There's going to be some semblance of, if it goes through. If the Twins are back on Bally, it'll be for one more season.
Right.
And that would be because some new term sheet was agreed upon by the Twins, by MLB, and by Bally, that some semblance of a rights fee. It's not going to be the $60 million, but some semblance of a rights fee is going to be handed the Twins' way. And that's better than nothing, because I don't know if MLB at this point is ready to say, okay, $60 million is gone. Here you go. Here's the pot of gold, and now take off. I don't think that's there right now. So they may have to negotiate something new just for one more year, but it would be better than nothing.
Right. But because the Twins are separate in the sense that their contract expired,
right,
and the other 14 teams are still under contract. The idea would sort of be, let's fold the Twins back in with those other 14 teams so that MLB can then say, all right, everybody's going to do one more year.
Right.
And then this time next year, instead of having to figure out what to do with the Twins, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks solely, now there's 15 teams or 18 teams, and then you could do it as more of a collective group effort. You can really, if you were to take this approach, you can launch a bigger picture thing from an MLB standpoint, and it's a lot easier to do it with 15 teams, with 18 teams, with 20 teams, with half the league, than it is to say, what are we going to do with the Twins? Because there's so much uncertainty. And from the Twins standpoint, I know I've talked to some of the Twins officials about this, is they don't necessarily want to do something long-term in terms of an agreement, even if something appealing presented itself, because a year from now, 14 other teams are going to be in the same boat that you're in now.
Right.
And maybe MLB has designs on something much bigger that they would need or want the Twins involved in. So this potentially, if, like you said, it would be a one-year thing back with Bally, sort of status quo in a lot of senses, and then would set things up for everyone's contract, then it sounds like MLB would push for
and
this.
I'm confident in saying this.
Would be up after next year.
Right. And I'm confident that if indeed the Twins are back on Bally for the 2024 season, the most significant change will be blackouts.
Right.
That blackouts
I'm glad you brought
are
that
going away.
Because you had a quote in the
blackouts.
initial Zoom
I mean, sorry.
Let's get into this.
Yeah, what kind of blackouts are we talking?
So you correct me if I'm wrong, because if you wanted to watch the Twins and you did not have cable,
right,
in Iowa, in
if you're
Minnesota,
trying to stream
Twins baseball,
MLB
TV, without having cable, you were blocked out from viewing the Twins on the MLB.TV app. Right. That is going away.
Is that the case even if you are in Bloomington as opposed to Iowa?
My understanding is that if you pay, I don't know what the terms are going to be. Let's say it's going to be $20 a month. You're going to pay $20 a month for MLB.TV. I would think that would give you the rights to every. I don't think that would be just
MLB.TV provides all of the out of town.
It's not just Twins. It's not just we can watch anything you want for $20 a month, but you can therefore then, because the previous contract language the Twins had with Diamond and Bally did not allow that to happen, right? Blackouts were in play. It was protected. Yes, it was protected rights. That's been dissolved, and that will be dissolved in any new deal that does come to be.
Because the Twins are prioritizing, especially after the last several years, where I think they estimated, Dan Hayes wrote about this last month, I think, where they estimate their sort of what's Twins territory, something like 4-point-something million potential eyes, let's say. Yeah. And they feel like they only got to about a third of those. And so regardless of what the monetary situation is, which is obviously important for them, but they're prioritizing, and I think baseball is probably just heading this direction overall. They're prioritizing, forget, we can squeeze an extra dollar out of the situation by allowing blackouts or allowing the television channel to control that. We just want the most Twins fans to be able to tune into this, whether it's like you said, you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to
be free.
Sign up for a service.
It's not going to be free.
Do whatever. But if you want to watch it, and I know we have friends or listeners in Iowa, and it got ridiculous. We always talk about Mike Bates, who's a former or a blogger and a podcaster himself, but he lives in Iowa, and not only were the Twins blacked out, but the Cubs and the White Sox and the Brewers and the
probably Cardinals, probably Cardinals too, right?
Teams that you could never travel
Iowa,
to.
which does not really have a team, was blacked out of 1/3 of all of the games.
So that to me, it was going back to what we talked about at the very beginning. Why this job was appealing? That was one of the big questions. Is that it wasn't the driving reason, but it was up there for me because is Twins baseball going to be more accessible? Come on, it's 2023, 2024 is coming up here. Let's not be archaic about this avenue here. Let's be progressive. Let's find a way to just modernize the way that people are consuming sports, that they don't have to be just locked into their couch at their home. They want to be on the move. They want to be out and about, weekends, boats, at their kids' events. And they want to have the game on in the palm of their hand. Why is that so difficult?
Yes.
Well, this new, even if they're back on Bally for one more season, I'm confident in saying that they'll have that chance now to then take the Twins with them on their handheld device.
Not only is that music to everyone's ears, but I think that everyone now should associate that change with Cory Provus.
Yes.
Just, like Pavlov's dog type thing. Like,
ring the bell, the dogs come. When you're watching Twins baseball on your iPhone.
When you're out on a deck somewhere,
I want that credit.
Somewhere,
thanks, man.
Say, Cory Provus did this for me.
I was going to say Gleeman and the Geek, but all right.
We don't need that. No. But you're right. Like, it got to be absurd that the last hurdle in terms of being able to watch whatever you want whenever you want it, and I don't just mean sports, but just whatever. You want to watch HBO on a plane. It got to be absurd that the only thing you couldn't do in this world in 2023, 2024, whatever,
was watch your local sports.
Watch the Minnesota Twins or baseball or whatever. It got to be ridiculous, and that's a leftover, part of the bubble that is essentially bursting, which we've been talking about, which is everything was tied to cable as a distributor. Whereas now, every year that loses 10, 20% or whatever.
Right.
And now it's the cable companies are still running streaming and all that. And I don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years.
Right.
But I love the idea. And that's all Twins fans have been asking for the last several years when the Bally streaming situation went the way it did and they couldn't get it on YouTube TV or Hulu or whatever. It's just, we know we're going to have to pay for it, and that's a decision everybody's going to have to make. I mean, there are going to be some people go, well, I don't want to pay $20 a month or whatever, and that's a separate issue.
Totally, they're right.
But the issue really is, if I want to pay to watch Twins, can I watch Twins? And it got to be absurd, and I know the Twins agreed with this. It was just beyond their control. It was out of their hands. it got to be absurd that there was no amount of money you could pay to watch it. So I think that is a huge thing. And I also just think for them, well, there's so much uncertainty from a monetary standpoint or revenue standpoint. We've talked about how that affects payroll and all that stuff. In the short term, long term, it's never going to be a bad thing to make it available to 100% of your potential audience, or as close to 100% after being 30%, 40%, or whatever, because unfortunately there's a lot of stuff people can watch.
Right.
And if you don't give them access to the thing they really want to watch, they'll go to the second thing they want to watch.
Right,
and so I think you lose out on so many young fans or even middle-aged and old fans who just go, well, I haven't been able to watch the Twins how I want them the last several years. And you don't know that those people are going to come back. So I think that is a huge thing for the Twins. And like you said, for you taking over this job.
And don't you guys think, too, that when this ruling comes down, it will give, more than anything else, it'll give all parties time. This unknown that everybody's in right now is certainly impacting how free agency is going this winter and why the Twins haven't done anything, because there's some uncertainty about what do they have available to use in terms of,
I just read
building
the Guardians are in the same spot.
Right.
Their payroll's under $100 million. I just read yesterday, Dennis Lin, our San Diego Padres writer for The Athletic, they've had a $250 million payroll. They're getting it under 200. Because of the same thing. They had a 20-year, $1 billion agreement with whatever charter cable. Texas, same thing.
Texas, I mean, Texas spent what, almost $500 million on Marcus Semien and Corey Seager. Right. Well, they signed those deals because they thought they were getting $100 million a year annually from their television partner.
And that might be going
good luck
too, right?
If the Twins don't return to Valley Sports North for a 1-year contract, do you know what the other types of solutions look like? Like how? What other mediums people are going to be able to get? Not just we know via streaming, MLB.TV,
but which the Padres and the Diamondbacks did at the end of last season.
I think it'll be through MLB, like we saw with those two teams last year. That they'll find a way to get it.
They'll find some channel on Comcast.
On Comcast, say it's channel 499. That for 20 hours a day, it might be the Twins logo, right? And then a half hour before the game starts, we pop on. We pop on and we just go, right? And then the game plays. So I think that's certainly in play. Maybe even if it comes to it, maybe some weekend over-the-air games. Right. I don't know. Maybe April and May before you get into other sports, certainly before football starts, that maybe you have some chances to put the Twins on, the weekends on a local, on a local TV channel here in town.
With it key being weekend generally, because most of those affiliates already have that they can't not broadcast. Fox.
That's the trickiest part of this is I know when it became clear the Twins' deal with Bally was going to expire. A lot of people were like, well, why? We got this question constantly, which is why doesn't they just go to Fox 9 or
CBS or KSTP?
I mean, there are some days, particularly weekends, where that's a possibility if they were interested. But for the most part, those channels are running, the news, 10 o'clock news. Well, the Twins are playing at 10 o'clock if you're running it. But beyond that, Carol Levin is running
soap operas,
NBC stuff.
Soap operas, and those are popular and those are sold, and
even if they weren't, even if the local channel said, well, we'd rather have the Twins than whatever the 8 p.m. Wednesday NBC show is, they have no ability to change that because part of being an NBC affiliate is
you have to carry programming, yes.
And so that was a tricky thing where it's not necessarily just find a local channel, because what's beautiful about baseball and why it's been so valuable over the last several decades and why the Twins are getting $55 million a year and the Rangers are getting $110 million a year is it's 160-something nights or days and nights of programming. But for channels that don't have a shortage of programming, that's actually a negative thing.
Yes.
Because you can't just shoehorn it in.
Exactly.
If it's Vikings, you can probably find 16 days where it's we'll preempt this and we'll show it at 2 a.m.
Right.
But you can't do that 6 days a week, basically. No. So that was part of the difficulty that the Twins are running into now, whereas it's not just as simple as, well, go to one of the 4 local channels.
Right.
Well, yeah, that would be great, but it's not really feasible from either standpoint.
And welcome back.
That was Cory Provus and John Bonus and a young upstart,
Aaron Gleeman of TheAthletic.com. We should start giving that one of our promo codes on various ads. So we use stamps.com/. Aaron Gleeman did The Athletic.
The whole thing. Yeah, that's good.
Gleeman The Athletic, something like that.
Thank you to Cory for being a great guest and for also talking to us for 50% longer than he agreed to talk to us, basically. And it was his anniversary.
His anniversary.
He was like, I got to go.
With his
But
wife.
we were having fun.
Yeah, we totally tied him up.
So you can listen to that whole episode. It's like 90 minutes long on patreon.com/Gleeman. And you can get the whole archive for free when you sign up. And we'll be doing probably a mailbag episode like Wednesday after the holidays, maybe. Assuming there's no moves.
We won't be doing another free podcast, I think, until 2 weeks from today. We won't be doing one just before New Year's, but we will almost definitely be doing a mailbag Patreon episode sometime next week. And then, of course, when the Twins make a trade for Corbin Burns, we're going to have the emergency podcast over the offseason. So you'll be able to hear that as well. So
okay, before we talk about actually some trade stuff that we're going to talk about to finish up here, let's talk about our last sponsor, which is the Game Time app.
Right.
On your phone.
I am just
a
fishing
power
around.
user.
I was Game Time apping yesterday to see if I can get some tickets to the Detroit Lions Vikings Christmas Eve game. I have not pulled the trigger yet.
Yeah.
But doing a little research. I love the way that they kind of organize things even online. So you can kind of see. Sometimes it's easier to use those on a desktop, but the Game Time app isn't a desktop website. It's an app, right? So you're going to go out there, you're going to download the Game Time app. It does a real nice job of showing you where the different sections are, kind of an overview. You can kind of go around and say, okay, this section
best values and
where some of the best values are.
Their specialty.
I have literally bought them while I am tailgating 5 minutes before the game and had them delivered to my phone.
Yeah, because their specialty is hard to find tickets, and it can be sporting events, shows, everything, but also last-minute tickets.
Right.
Like if you're walking to Target Field, or if you're a Wolves fan, you're walking to Target Center, a couple of clicks, you can have it on your phone by the time you get to the gate, and they can scan you in. Yeah. And if you download, you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Gleeman, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account on the Game Time app. Redeem the code Gleeman, Gleeman. You get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, so to finish up here, we talk a lot about trades from the incoming standpoint. Like, could they trade for a center fielder?
Right.
John's talking about Corbin Burns. They traded for Pablo Lopez. They traded for Sonny Gray. They traded for Tyler Mahle, Kenta Maeda, and on and on and on. They've traded for a lot of pitchers. And yet people every time seem completely befuddled at the notion that they would trade for a starting pitcher. Well, how do we know that? Well, they've done it every offseason.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Sometimes twice.
Yeah, I think the last time we did a free podcast, I was a little like, I'm not really sure they're going to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, well, they've only done it seven times.
They do keep pulling it off. And ultimately what it comes down to is, it's not like they have any shortage of assets that they could trade for a great starting pitcher. It's just a matter of, how much are they willing to pay? So, it's just that you're paying in terms of prospects or players instead of in terms of money, right?
So let's talk a little bit about those assets, the outgoing aspect of trades. Obviously, one of the things I would say, certainly more so than like Twins Daily, this is my influence on the podcast. I don't let us veer down the path of specific trade ideas very often because I just think it's so often a waste of time two ways. One is that's not generally how the Twins view things. In other words, there's surely articles and threads on Twins Daily or Reddit or whatever, Twitter or whatever, where people are like, how much would it cost to get Corbin Burns or to get fill in the blank pitcher, specific pitcher from a specific team? But that's not really how the Twins view it. Obviously, they have guys that they would like to target, but they're like viewing it from a bucket. Here's a bucket of 8 starters who we think fit this description. We're trying to pick a guy from this bucket, basically. So that's part of why I shy away from it. Yeah, the other reason...
It's similar to what free agent... You'd see a bucket of these types of free agents. Now, they don't all cost the same.
Right.
Some are a little
they
bit...
have preferences. And all
that's
that.
right.
But then the other reason why I tend to keep us from veering down that path is I just think a lot of the times it's just pure kind of baseless speculation, and it gets a little silly at times because inevitably what happens if you're reading a forum or you're reading whatever or listening to a podcast that veers more along those lines, who has a less jerky host than me, it's like, well, they want Corbin Burns from the Brewers.
Right.
Well, what would they have to trade for Corbin Burns? And you look, and after a few back and forth in the discussion, it's, well, we'll give them these 11 Steam-rated prospects for them, and we'll kick in, I don't know, Willie Castro or something like that.
Sure,
and it's like, okay, fine. And it gets to be to the point that if you showed that to the same forum, but for the other team, they would go,
of course.
Well, y'all are not. Like, what are you talking about here? And it's the opposite for that. Yes. And so I tend to not see as much value in that. It's fun.
Sure.
Like that. I mean, it'd be better for clicks and all this stuff if we did that. But I more look at it as like, what is the type of player they're trying to acquire? In this case, I think we can be pretty certain it's, a
playoff caliber starter,
mid-rotation or higher starter, playoff caliber starter, frontline starter, however you want to name it. They've shown a willingness and an ability to acquire that pretty much every offseason of late. But then, and so, yeah, like you said, it's a matter of cost, it's a matter of age, it's a matter of performance, and then team control, all that. It's sort of a sliding scale on this. It's not that there are guys they think are better, but the guy they think is the best pitcher available might not be their top target, because if that guy costs twice as much to acquire and only has 1 year of team control, whereas a guy who's slightly less good as a pitcher but costs half as much to acquire and has 3 years of team control, well, they're going to value the technically lesser pitcher more. So that's part of it. But then the flip side also is you don't really need to name like, oh, this is the guy they're going to trade for a starting pitcher. Now, in some cases, with like Polanco and Kepler, when those guys are clearly the most prominent potential trade candidates, they would like to find that fit. But realistically, it's not as if like last season, they did not go, we're going to trade Luis Arraez. What's the best pitcher we can get for Luis Arraez? Or we're going to trade Brusdar Graterol. Yeah. What's the best pitcher we can get for Brusdar Graterol? It's more, hey, we're interested in Pablo Lopez. Right. And I can tell you, when those negotiations started, it didn't start with Luis Arraez. Right. The Twins were trying to make that happen with other major league hitters.
Right, that's right.
And you can probably fill in the blanks there. And the Marlins just said, no, that doesn't work for us. We like Luis Arraez. That's right. And so how do you value that? And that's subjective too. But I wrote a few weeks ago on The Athletic my future value big board, I call it. But really all it is trade value. You can view it both ways, which is if I kind of, in my head, how I determine the rankings is if everybody in the Twins organization, if you wipe the slate clean and they had no players in the organization, who would you pick first to restart the organization? Right. And that includes their actual age, their actual ability and health, but also their contractual status. And so, for instance, Walker Jenkins has played 20 games in the minors. Right. But he's 18. He's got full team control and tremendous upside. Well, I actually didn't have him number one on the list, somewhat controversially.
By the way, I've deliberately, you write this story every year. I've deliberately not read this one.
And he actually,
because I wanted to save in case we were talking about it.
He's so committed to not revealing to himself my list that he avoids reading everything else I write for the other 364 days a year.
Not true.
But
sometimes.
It's a good bit, though. I like it as a bit. Yes. Okay. So, whereas, like,
let me guess where Walker Jenkins
is.
But
whereas, like, well, it's not that hard. Okay, but whereas there are good players. I remember, like Sonny Gray last year, on last year's this time last year, I wrote the list, and people were like, "Well, you have Sonny Gray way too low," and I'm like, "Well, you got to remember though, we're not
a free agent this
right. It's 1 year of Sonny Gray versus, like, for example, 6 years of Brooks Lee or 7 years of Brooks Lee potentially." And, in this case, it's like, well, yeah, Max Kepler is as good or better than, like, Matt Wallner, let's say. Right. You can debate that, obviously. But except you're not just comparing how good the player is. You have only 1 year of Max Kepler. He'll be a free agent after this upcoming season, and that 1 year is priced at $10 million. You have 6 more years of Matt Wallner, the next 3 of which he'll make the minimum salary. And so that's how I try to balance this age upside, but the team control aspect plays a big part. So, I mean, the first few guys on this list, nobody's going to want to trade.
Right.
But I will say, we get asked this a lot on mailbags. I get asked this when I do mailbags for The Athletic too. Who's untouchable in the Twins farm system?
Right.
No one.
Yeah, right.
No one's ever untouchable. Now, there are players you've been in your head building around,
Right.
and would take a ridiculous offer to get, but there's never been a prospect who's truly untouchable. It's everybody's got a price, like Ted DiBiase once said when I was a child, the $1 Million Man, which is, Walker Jenkins is probably the best Twins prospect since Buxton.
Yes.
I think you can make the argument from like a polish and health standpoint, given what we know about Buxton, that he might be like kind of the best Twins prospect since Mauer, maybe. One of those two.
Sure.
But if the Orioles called
Right.
and said, we'll give you Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, and you can pick a prospect.
Right.
Well, yeah, of course you would do that.
Right,
There's no untouchable.
Sure.
It's just, the scale is a lot higher on these guys. So
it comes down to what would ever be a reasonable, like,
Yes.
what would never happen. Right. But it could happen. Like, you're not saying it's, go ahead.
I mean, you see, Juan Soto got traded from a team that he just won a World Series for, and he was 23 years old. He's on a Hall of Fame path. Well, they traded him. Shit happened. Yeah. Stuff happened. Okay, so you can, by the way, John probably disagrees with all kinds of these ones.
let's see where that.
I mean, he's wrong, but he can disagree. No. I debated this a lot because.
You going to start at the top?
Yeah,
let's start at the top. Good.
It doesn't need to be a letter.
No, I agree with you. I'm with it.
Because here's the thing: people already read it.
Right,
So what are we revealing?
It's an old story.
But typically, the top of this list is either going to be a very young sort of all-star,
right,
or a guy who hasn't even reached the majors
right.
yet. Because you're talking about what's the future value under team control. So Walker Jenkins is a great example of that. Walker Jenkins has been in the organization for like 6 months, not even 6 months.
Right.
He's 18. He's played 20 games. Do we know really what he's going to be? No, but the upside is almost limitless.
Right.
You have full team control over him. And if the Twins said to other teams today, we're looking to trade Walker Jenkins.
Right.
Give us your best offers. The names they would be offered for Walker Jenkins in terms of like a frontline starting pitcher are they're obscene.
Right.
I'm not talking about like Corbin Burns.
Right.
They could get Corbin. If they wanted Corbin Burns today, they could get Corbin Burns for Walker Jenkins, and the Brewers would give them other stuff.
Yes.
I'm talking about
For
guys who are like 26-year-old all-stars with
Right.
multiple years. I mean, they could get that for Walker Jenkins. Now, it's a separate topic whether that's actually something they should pursue, but that's not what we're talking about. But then the other part of me is I do value the certainty of it. And so like Royce Lewis still has 5 years of team control.
Right.
And the injury part clouds this a lot more. But let's sort of set that aside and just more like theoretically. I'm so much more certain, if healthy, that Royce Lewis is a really good Major League Baseball player. Whereas no matter how good an 18-year-old prospect is, there's still a 10%, 20%.
I feel the same way. And I think you and I both
that they're just not good.
Right. Yeah.
That's nothing against Walker Jenkins. That's just life.
Right.
I mean, it's going to take him 4 years to get to the majors or whatever. And it's like a lot of stuff can happen with it. So I put Royce Lewis at number one.
Oh, good. That's what I had to.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. Like if the Twins sent out an email to 29 blind carbon copy to 29 GMs and said Royce Lewis is available and Walker Jenkins is available.
Which one do you
Send us
want?
your best offer.
Yeah,
I think there might be some variance there, but at least how I tend to, and this goes to my prospect rankings too. I tend to value guys who have proven it at AA and AAA. We talked about this, like relative to Baseball America.
Right.
I want more information available. I want more certainty. And upside is still the key here, but it's not like Royce Lewis is lacking in upside. I mean, Royce Lewis might already be an all-star, and you got 5 more years of him, and he's in the majors already. Whereas Walker Jenkins, what would be a good outcome for Walker Jenkins at 18? If he's as good as Royce Lewis.
Right.
Hopefully without the injury factor. So I had Royce Lewis number one.
I'm interested to see how you
I'd
step through 2, 3, 4.
I had Walker Jenkins number two.
Okay.
After that, I would say you can sort of arrange this in some different ways, but I kind of had...
So you have those two sort of a half step above everybody else.
I would say. Okay. I put it this way. If you polled every member of the Twins... If you polled every front office executive in baseball and said, you get first pick of the Twins organization. Who are you drafting? I think every single one would draft either Walker Jenkins or Royce Lewis.
Yeah.
Whereas if those two are off the board and you say who are you then picking third, I think there's room for all kinds of disagreement there. So I had Brooks Lee number 3.
Okay.
Which I can already see what's going to happen with Brooks Lee, which is because Walker Jenkins is there, this sort of happened to like Sano or Barrios with Buxton, which is you have these sort of A-level prospect,
right.
Consensus. Brooks Lee's probably a consensus top 40 prospect.
Right. You have this prospect that everybody's going to get carried away with, right? Like Buxton, right?
Or it's like
Jenkins,
if you put Brooks Lee in 20 other organizations, or for that matter, you put him in 19 of the last 20 Twins prospect lists, people would be going nuts for Brooks Lee.
Right.
It's like he's a consensus top 40, top 50 prospect. He's almost sure to be a quality regular. He's got some star upside. He's pretty close to the majors. He was a top 10 pick. Except when you add Walker Jenkins to the mix, and it's like, well, this guy has unlimited potential. He's a consensus top 20 prospect. Right. He's got MVP caliber upside. Well, then it's like, well, Brooks Lee's only their number 2 prospect.
Right, yeah, right.
Well, yeah, but I mean, and so Brooks Lee to me is an interesting mix of what we were talking about, which is he has a lot of certainty for a guy who hasn't played in the majors.
Right.
In that I'm pretty confident, and I think the Twins feel this way too. I'm not confident that he's going to be like an MVP candidate or even like a 5-time All-Star, but I'm pretty confident that 10 years from now
he's going to have an 8-year career.
Right. He's going to be a quality major league player, a starting caliber major league player.
Yeah.
And so
he will hit free agency and get paid.
Right.
Right. That's right.
And part of that is just like his player type, but part of it is that he hit well at AA. He held his own at AAA. He has a good college career and all that stuff. So I put him at number 3. I think you can make an argument, let's see, that he would be as low as like number 5 or 6 maybe, but I put him at number 3.
Okay.
Because I do think he's got a high level of certainty for a prospect and still has pretty good upside. Number 4, well, this one, I could put him anywhere in the top 10 probably. But I put Julian at number 4.
So you've hit the same my top 4 as well. Okay. Those were the top 4. I didn't even prep last night on this. I'm just literally sitting down and thinking about the top. Right? Yeah,
John, I believe
you believe it. Yeah.
When you say there's 2 things I believe
when I was drinking hazies with Phil Miller, I was not actually prepping.
Here's 3 things I believe about John. He went out drinking beer last night. He didn't read my article, and he didn't prep for the show. Those are 3 things I will always believe about John. All right.
I wondered how you divide 2, 3, and 4 because they're an interesting mix in terms of. I think what they revealed to some extent is sort of your value system, and I wondered if you would have Brooks Lee over Jenkins, in part because I know you value somebody who's closer to the majors than somebody who is further away from the majors. And listen, there's all kinds of reasons to be really crazy excited about Jenkins. I mean, he could not have had a better 6 months or 3 months, than he.
That's part of
right.
Is like if you would have asked me this, and in fact, I did when they drafted Jenkins in July. Right. I did a midseason top 20, just like a quick article on The Athletic. Like, here's an update, and I had Brooks Lee ahead of him. But the whole write up about Jenkins and Brooks Lee was, I don't actually think this will be the case 3 months from now.
Right.
But until. Like we talked about the lemon test for Jenkins because he hadn't debuted yet. Right. And so I thought, I said, I realized this is going to be sort of weird because lists are going
top 5 pick. Right. Yeah. Right.
But then he went and played 30 games.
Right.
And he hit 340 with power and didn't strike out and he looked good. Right. And everybody was in awe of him. And I thought, all right, well, that's enough. Now, that's not AA and AAA. But I think that combined with the upside, he is a better prospect than Brooks Lee. And I will say, like, Twins officials really like Brooks Lee. But what they say about Jenkins is like on another level of like, so that's how
I think that can happen though, just because out of people like it getting excited, and you see somebody with a crazy amount of potential, and when you get to by the time you've gotten to AAA, you've already established my ceiling is much higher than what this guy who's barely been in the thing is. But my floor is already much higher than that. But my ceiling is never going to. You're going to have more trouble getting. You're going to have trouble getting carried away with me the same way you would 2 years ago.
I mean, that's true. Think of it like dating. We're famous for our dating talk on the show. We once were famous for that for about 6 months. People hated it. But
only one person really hated it.
No, people didn't really like it. But first few weeks or months you're dating somebody, it's like they got unlimited upside.
Right, that's right.
And then you start to you get more information about them, and hopefully that causes you to fall in love with that person, which we both, I think, are in that situation. Not with each other. Well, sort of with each other. But you do reveal the flaws of that person. I just joked about John's flaws, basically. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's a really good player. It just means, along with learning more information about him, I learned about the flaws about him.
That's right.
So that with Julian, I'm certain he can hit.
Yeah, and that's the why I was interested in 2, 3, 4, because Julian has an even higher level of certainty than Lee. Right. Doesn't have the defensive. Although we've seen enough from the defense. Like, his defense definitely got better last year.
Well, here's the
luster
telltale on that is, I think probably like in June, Brooks Lee is going to take the position that Julian has, and Julian's going to move to a different position. Probably. I think that's kind of how it's setting up. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like, and we talked about Julian like this last spring. I mean, Baldelli was going nuts for him last spring. You just watch him and it's like, it's kind of like how we talk about relievers sometime, like with Duran when they moved into the bullpen. It doesn't have to be that complicated. If you throw 101 and you got a good breaking ball, you're going to be a good reliever. Like, there are levels to it, like polish and control and all that. But like, if you're Julian and you never swing at non-strikes, and you have 20 homer power, and you strike out a lot. You don't strike out 40% of the time. You're going to be a pretty good hitter. Like, those are like the baseline skills. Now, the defensive question with him, I think we probably saw a good version of him from a batting average standpoint this year. Like, batting average on balls in play, luck a little bit with that strikeout rate. Like, I don't know what he hit, but he hit like 280 probably or something like that. I think more likely he's like a 250 hitter if he doesn't change stylistically. Yeah. So maybe that caps him a little bit. If he ends up being a decent second baseman, that's big. But if he ends up being a first base DH, that takes some of the upside away. But I'm just so certain he can hit. And I think the Twins I think they just want him to be the leadoff man for the next 5 years, basically. And so, yeah, I would value that. And all these guys, Lewis has 5 years of team control and will be minimum salary for the next several.
This is the key, right?
Jenkins and Lee have the full 6+ years of team control, including the minimum salaried years. And then Julian has not used up a year. So he has 6 full years of team control because he didn't use up a full year of service time.
Was he not called up at opening day? He was on the opening day?
June or something. He didn't get the job.
Oh, okay.
He was called up a couple times. So that's huge too. And the reason I bring that up here is that the number 5 guy on my list is the first guy who's making money.
Okay.
And that's Pablo Lopez.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering about this too.
It's very tricky, or I've found it tricky, to compare, Brooks Lee, who's yet to debut and has 6 years of team control, 3 of which will be making the minimum, to Pablo Lopez, who's a all-star and is making $8 million this year, and then will start making $21 million a year for the next 3 years. So he has less team control. That team control is much better compensated, so the value is different. Like, he's valuable, but is Brooks Lee for $700,000 more valuable than Pablo Lopez for $21 million?
Even if you're just talking
team building.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, you can say Brooks Lee is more valuable. That seems to me they're at a different level. But, how about like Joe Ryan? Like, Joe Ryan is somebody who's out under
more team control and cheaper team control, but he's not as good.
Not as good, this year, and showed some flaws, especially in the middle of the year, etc. But if you asked me in April or May, I might have said, no, I think he's probably more valuable.
Here's how I ultimately decided to put Lopez 5th, which I think you could put Lopez as high as like 3rd or as low as like 10th if you really are obsessed with the monetary aspect. Because if you're like, well, he's making $21 million a year, what's the excess value of that? It's not that huge. I mean, maybe he's a $30 million pitcher or something like that. But I think there's a opportunity cost that the Twins paid basically to just get him. You can't just get a pitcher like that.
Where was Arise on your list last year?
I'll go with that note. Arise was last.
There we go. Good. Okay, good. We think alike.
Well, this really is a marriage.
Yeah. Okay.
This really is a marriage, John.
Yep.
The way I thought about it ultimately was, well, if they were trying to trade for a clone of Pablo Lopez after the season he just had with the contract he now signed with the Twins, what would they have to give up?
Right.
Well, we saw last offseason they had to give up Luis Ariz, who was number 6 on my list this time last year.
Okay.
Which, you could argue that's low or high or whatever. But you got to remember, Lopez has improved his performance significantly since then.
Right, yeah.
And the contract he signed with the Twins, at least as of right now, is even more favorable because it added 2 years of team control. Now they had to pay him, but it added 2 years of team control to what they initially acquired from the Marlins. So you would have to say that Lopez is more valuable today as sort of a trade asset than the version of him that they traded for. So if they traded the number 6 guy on last year's list, now last year's list didn't have Walker Jenkins.
Right.
Brooks Lee hadn't proven much. Royce Lewis was still injured. So it's a much stronger top of the list this year.
Yep.
But I thought at minimum he's as valuable as Arise was last year and probably more. So that's why I put him 5th.
All right.
All right. We don't have to spend that much time on
Let's
these
keep
next
it.
guys.
I want to hear it about 6 through 10 now. Where's Wallner?
Yeah. So number 6, I have Duran.
Okay.
Now,
interesting.
Part of that can vary a lot depending on what you think about relievers.
Yep.
But to me, and I'm not that, I don't value relievers that high, I think.
Right.
Like, I'm probably lower than most just in
Yeah,
general.
I think so.
Like, I'm not a guy who would go spend huge money on relievers, but he's at the very high end of relievers, obviously. And he has 4 more years of team control. And
Some of those are going to get expensive, but yeah.
True, and especially now that he's an actual closer and he's getting saves, which get paid in arbitration.
Right.
But the next 2 or 3 years should be reasonable money.
Okay.
And I just thought, well, we've seen what like a high-end reliever gets, a high-end reliever with team control gets on the free agent or on the trade market. If the Twins were to try to trade Yohan Duran, would they get a prospect similar to Emmanuel Rodriguez, who I have 7th? I think so.
I was going to see where Emmanuel Rodriguez was.
Well, he's 7th. So those were kind of, to me, interchangeable because I thought, what would the Twins kind of trying to be getting if they were to trade Duran? It's probably a top 100 prospect with some upside, like Emmanuel Rodriguez. Now, obviously, these are subjective, but that's sort of how I try to think of it. So I have Duran 6th.
Yeah.
I have Emmanuel Rodriguez 7th. And again, what I said about Brooks Lee being sort of overshadowed by Jenkins, it's Emmanuel Rodriguez has that about Brooks Lee and Jenkins.
Right.
There are a lot, I would say half the teams in baseball, probably, at least a third of the teams in baseball, Emmanuel Rodriguez would be clearly their top prospect.
Right.
He's probably going to be like number 75 on a lot of lists overall.
Yeah.
And yet he's no higher than 2nd and probably 3rd on most Twins lists. So it's, it's all relative. So and then to me, there's a drop off. I think the 1-2 are clear.
Okay.
Lewis Jenkins. Then I think these sort of Lee, Julian, Lopez, Duran, Emmanuel Rodriguez, what's that, 5 guys, are a chunk. And then I see a drop off, and the name, you mentioned them already, I have number 8, is Joe Ryan.
Okay.
And Joe Ryan there's a lot of uncertainty with him the way his season went, I think.
Right.
But you have, we got 4 seasons of team control. He's going to start to get expensive relatively soon.
Yeah.
The question with him is like the upside. Is he just kind of a pretty good mid-rotation starter, or do you think he can be, a number 2 starter? So I have Joe Ryan 8th, and then I have Bailey Ober 9th.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I would choose Joe Ryan over Bailey Ober.
I would too.
But they both have the same team control.
Yeah,
they're roughly the same age.
I think a lot of people underrate Bailey Ober is what I think. I'm really saying.
Bailey Ober has been better than Joe Ryan.
Right.
In a less strikeout-driven way.
Right.
And he has more – his question marks are like more durability-based, whereas Joe Ryan's question marks are more performance or like consistency-based, I would say. Yeah. But they're both kind of youngish, mid-rotation, team-controlled starters. So I would say 8, 9. And then number 10, I have Matt Wallner.
Okay.
I've been probably – well, when he was still stuck at AAA, I was accused of being way too high on Matt Wallner.
Yep.
When I was calling for them to trade Kepler and ditch Gallo and all sorts of stuff. Then they actually gave him a chance, and now a lot of people are pretty high on Matt Wallner. I don't think he has the same level of certainty with as Ed Julian, but I'm pretty sure Matt Wallner can hit. Now, the strikeout rate and the lack of defensive, range or like clumsiness in the outfield cap his value a little bit. I mean, if he ends up being a 210 hitter just because of the strikeouts, well, then, yeah, he's not an impact player. He's more like a number 6 hitter. He's a good hitter, but he's not someone you build around. But if he can, I have a little more confidence in him being more of a pure hitter than just a slugger. Like, I thought he made some really nice adjustments during the season on like high fastballs.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever going to be a high contact guy, but if he can keep his strikeout rate high instead of like Gallo-esque or Sano-esque, I think he's going to draw walks because he has a pretty good eye at the plate, and I think he's going to hit 30 homers a year. And I think, while he's not a great outfielder, he has a great arm, which has value, and I think he's fine in left field or right field. And 6 years of team control, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Which is like his
Is
whole
that is the team control what separates him from Ryan Jeffers in your mind?
Yeah, because Jeffers only has 3
Right.
team control.
Yeah.
But guess where Ryan Jeffers is?
11?
Number
I was
11.
gonna say.
Boy, we're on the same page. I think you're cheating, John. I think you read this article 5 times. I think you printed it out and hung it on your wall. You framed it.
Varland at 12?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Are you? Yeah.
Did you go past 10?
Yeah, I went 20.
Okay. All
Keep
right.
going, I guess. 13, I bet you don't get.
Brock Stewart?
No. But that's interesting. I did debate him for the top 20. He didn't make the
Okay.
top. 13, I put Correa. And here was my
Interesting.
thinking on Correa.
All right.
This was the most controversial. The comments were filled with people.
I thought you only did 10, so I definitely did not read this.
All right.
I thought we were wrapping up the podcast.
We will.
That was my throwaway.
I like that we got to Correa because Correa was the trickiest one because you can make the argument. Because what is this list basically? All this list is my attempt to determine excess value relative to team control and money. So like with Lopez, he's got a $70-something million contract, but I'm basically saying he's worth twice that.
Right.
Well, Correa is worth a lot, but he's owed $165 million over the next 5 years. I think you can make the argument if you believe he's not going to bounce back fully because of the health issues, because he had a really bad year by his standards, for sure, that he's a negative value.
Yeah.
In which case, he shouldn't even be on
I
this
wondered
list.
that, but I thought, no, teams would absolutely pick him up.
That's the thing. So I did ask around a couple people I know in other front offices, and I said, I'm not even talking specifically about Carlos Correa, like your thoughts about his ankle and all that. I'm saying, if Carlos Correa was a free agent right now, would he still get $150 million? And they all said absolutely.
Right.
I mean, we're going to see guys get that. But then I also thought, if the Twins said, you know what, it's not working out, Correa wants out, he's going to waive his no trade, they could. I said, could
We're
they?
going to put him on waivers. Is anybody going to claim him?
Somebody would claim him.
Yeah.
But I think the Twins could get actual trade value. And then my goal was, I'm trying to figure out what kind of trade value.
Right.
Well, so he's around Varland. Like, could they get a Louis Varland type
Right.
for Carlos Correa? I think realistically they could probably. And so, but I do think that if you just think he has a negative contract or negative value, then he shouldn't be on this list at all.
Of course. Right.
But I think he's sort of an in-between. Now, this time next year, we're going to know for sure.
Right.
Like,
well, we'll
you
have
know
a
what
better
I mean?
idea.
I mean, if he does this again, then
Yes.
it's not just a...
Now it's a real concern. Right.
Exactly. So I had him 13th. I'll just read the last 7 names. Kirilloff.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I like him. I think I would have moved him up that list.
David Festa.
Okay.
Marco Raya. Those are their
Yeah,
2 best
yeah,
pitching prospects. Polanco,
I was going to say,
which here's my thought on Polanco. We're probably about to find out what his trade value is.
Yeah, I think so too.
So what if I said to you the Twins are going to trade Polanco, what are you hoping to get? Now, obviously, you would hope for like a frontline starting pitcher, but realistically, you might be hoping to get a borderline top 100 prospect for Jorge Polanco. Well, I have him in between Marco Raya and Austin Martin.
Yeah.
That's the type of prospect, not a top. So that's kind of how
I mean, I think what I'm hoping to get out of it is 2/3 of a playoff caliber starter.
2/3 of a
of a 1 year deal on a playoff caliber starter, something like that. Like I
Right.
Polanco plus for somebody like a Burns or a.
So I had Polanco 17th, Austin Martin 18th.
Okay.
Jose Miranda 19th, and Chris Paddock 20th. I did think about Brock Stewart as a cutesy number 20.
Yeah.
Because the weird part about Brock Stewart is he's
old.
been around forever, and
Yeah.
he's 30 or 31 even, maybe? He's probably 30. But they have him for
team control.
4 more years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I agree.
And he's not going to be expensive.
Yeah.
So, like, if they can keep him healthy,
Right.
that's pretty
He
valuable.
goes up this list considerably if he has a good
Right.
year next year.
But I do
and that
think-
doesn't always happen because once you use up those 2 years of team
Right.
control, they can fall down the list.
But I
too.
do think with Paddock, similar to Lopez, the extension they signed
Yeah.
Paddock to added
Maybe.
value
Yeah.
because it extended the team.
No Kepler, though.
No Kepler. Because to me,
was
with
1 year.
Kepler, you would all the guys on this top 20. If the Twins could get a clone of that guy for Kepler in a trade, I
Yeah.
would be happy with that.
Yeah,
Do you know what I'm
probably.
saying? Whereas Polanco's got the 2 years of team control and plays a more premium position. I mean, that's
Maybe.
debatable.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all subjective. Okay, just
What
to,
was 20 on the list again?
Chris Paddock.
Oh, Paddock, yeah.
So just to wrap up, how this is in terms of actual potential trades as they look to get a starting pitcher or a center fielder or whatever. You know, the top 3, 4, 5 guys on this list, I have a very hard time. I mean, they're not trading Pablo
No.
Lopez. They're not trading Royce. No. They're not trading Brooks Lee. They're not trading
No.
all these guys. Now, could they trade number 7, Emmanuel Rodriguez? I don't think they would like to do that. But if a Pablo Lopez type were available in a trade,
Yeah, somebody who's under multiple years
you know,
of team
a
control and so
number
on.
75 to 100 range top prospect who was at low or high A this past year,
Right.
that's not an unreasonable ask.
Right.
And they have shown a willingness to trade that level of player, whether it was Gratterall, whether it was Chase Petty, that type of thing. Obviously Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, I think they're probably getting calls on those guys because they're younger,
Sure.
team-controlled starters.
Of course.
But logically, it wouldn't really make sense to trade unless you could trade like Bailey Ober plus a prospect for like a better version of Bailey Ober or a more veteran,
right.
higher-end version of Bailey Ober.
Those
But that's
guys,
a pretty
that kind of trade never happens.
thread that needle is
right, that's-
pretty.
Yeah, right.
Now, then you get past that point, you get to like Matt Wallner,
Yeah.
Louis Varlin, Kirilloff, Festa, Raya,
Yeah.
Polanco, obviously, Austin Martin, Miranda. I could see all those names in some, individually or in combo being the names that are bandied about to packages for, a Sonny Gray type that they
Sure.
2 years ago, or the Pablo Lopez of last year, or the Kenta Maeda of 4 years ago, or whatever. Like you're trying to get a number 2 or number 3 starter. Well, they're going to ask you about your best pitching prospects. Well, that's Festa and Raya. They're going to ask you about Polanco, possibly. They're going to ask you about, Louis Varlin.
Right.
They're going to ask you about, Kirilloff or Miranda as sort of depressed assets that still potentially are impact bad. So all those names, I feel like they do have the bullets to get that done. I mean, I think that's a pretty good group.
Yeah.
And there's other guys we haven't even mentioned.
I mean, what it suggests is what we kind of started this segment with is if they want to pay the freight, they can get themselves a good playoff caliber starting pitcher. Yes, it is hard to find a trade partner, right? Yes, those guys are going to be in demand amongst other teams, like other teams. If the Twins are talking to the Milwaukee about Burns, a lot of teams are talking Milwaukee about Burns.
Yes, and if you're doing that, or Dylan Cease or something like that, they're going to ask about Emmanuel Rodriguez, maybe more. I don't know, but that's the type of guy they're going to ask.
But it's not like you don't have. It's not like you can't match the price. You can. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to.
Well, and then getting back to the idea of they tend to view this in sort of buckets. You call the Brewers, and Corbin Burns has 1 year of team control. He's great. He's a Cy Young caliber pitcher. He's got some injury issues, and it's only 1 year. Well, if the Brewers say, well, we want Emmanuel Rodriguez and something else, and Jorge Polanco maybe, for Corbin Burns, you go, well, that's 6 years of a really good prospect plus other stuff for 1 year of a start. We're just not comfortable with that.
Let's go talk to Luzardo.
Right. But because you're not just targeting Corbin Burns, you're targeting a type of pitcher like Corbin Burns, then you pivot to whoever else and you hope to find something. I think Luzardo is interesting. I saw an article. I wish I knew who wrote
interesting
this.
too.
Well, first of all, we saw Luzardo just shove against the Twins early on last season.
First series of the season.
He was unbelievable. And he wasn't that good all year, but he had a really good year.
Yeah.
Lefty, real good stuff. Some control issues, but high strikeout rate.
Yeah.
got to have 4
He's had 2 good years now, a year and a half.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good pitcher. Yeah. I saw something that the Marlins were the Marlins are always looking for bats, and they always have starting pitching the deal. That's how they ended up trading Lopez for
Trish had
Arias.
plenty of conversations with the Marlins last year about people in their system.
Oh, I saw it. I think maybe John Heyman or Joel Sherman, one of the national New York writers, said that they were talking. The Marlins were talking to the Royals about Vinny Pasquantino, who's a left-handed hitting first base DH. He had injury issues, and that Kansas City instead just went out and signed Walker and whoever else they just signed, instead of trading that guy who's their best hitter for a pitcher. Well, then I thought, well, Pasquantino, I'd maybe argue he's better than Kirilloff or more proven than Kirilloff, but he missed second half of last year with injuries. He's a good hitting first baseman, left-handed hitter. I thought, well, that's a Kirilloff type of player.
That's true.
If they called up the Marlins and said, we'll give you Kirilloff plus something for Luzardo, that's a deal I would probably make, and we're veering into specific trades, which I didn't want to. But that's why, like,
having can't help it.
Yeah, it's fun. No,
it is fun.
It's undeniably fun.
Right.
I just am going to get a text from someone and go, they'd hang up on us, or we would never do that. But that's why a list like this is valuable. Is like, yes, the top guys are the guys you don't want to trade, but those are the guys everyone. But then you start. Do you have the depth of quality in the 8 to 20 range that you can package Kirilloff and, I don't know,
Jose Miranda?
Yeah, or Kirilloff and Raya or something to get a Luzardo or to get a whatever pitcher of choice. And I do feel like the Twins, it's going to hurt.
Right.
But if you're trying to come up with trade scenarios, it has to hurt. Otherwise, why would the other team do it? Right. And so I do think the Twins are in sort of good position to do that. Okay. Thank you for listening to the show today and all year.
Right.
We will be back.
Hopefully the fact that this is almost 2 hours long is going to hold you over for 2 weeks. That's right. Or you could sign up for the Patreon and check out our mailbag episode, which we're probably coming out with sometime next week. Yes. And
people can send in mailbag questions about how stupid my list is.
When we get
how wrong I am. Although John agreed with most of it. No, I'm shocked.
It's kind of elementary. It's not that.
How dare you? How dare you? We're done. This is a good place. You know what? Let's end at the end of the year.
I love that you spent all this time doing that. I was like, I thought about it last night. I'd go with this as my top 4. I just start guessing.
I spent weeks. I had spreadsheets. I was calling executives.
I'm just doing it off the top of my head. I like that.
I sent 400 texts to other executives. Is this crazy? And John's like, I'd go. Let's see. Jeffers 11.
You think Stewart?
John can't even remember. He's like, Kirilloff exists. Yeah, put him 14. Oh, that's where I had him. Okay. Anyway, thank you to our sponsors.
Game Time at BetterHelp, at Stamps, at HelloFresh, and Storyworth. And thank you again very much for listening. Thank you for a great 2023, and we'll talk to you again in 2024.
Gleeman